In the Holy Quran, it answers the question, why is there much talk of peace in the West, but what is found less is peace? They talk blah 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 about peace, but for the most part, you will see that the people who talk about peace are hypocrites. Where does so much hypocrisy come from? It means that everyone knows that peace among us and with all neighbors is perfect. That is the will of God, and that is what leads us to a perfect life. But when we go to the real world, to the facts, we will see that the same politicians who always talk about the virtue of peace are the ones behind the cause of each of the wars that have led millions of civilians to the fire, to death. So the main question is, why is there so much talk about peace and it is pure lies in the West? Why can't they achieve peace? The Holy Quran, in that law of the Holy Quran, explains to us well that there is a path to peace. If you do not enter that path of peace and reject the path of peace and enter the path of the devil is a sworn enemy and only wants to place enmity, hatred, and war among us. So, if a person chooses the path of God, they will enter into peace, what is called shalom in Hebrew, Islam in Arabic. Then, they will enter into peace with God, with themselves, and with their neighbors. But the person who does not enter into peace is already against themselves. The person who is harming themselves with sins, the person who is having a lot of contradiction, their work with their intellect, because they follow emotions, follow lust, and know what they are doing, is wrong. So they are wrong. Inside, they are not at peace within. The person who is at war inside cannot transmit peace. A person who is a source of bitterness and poison cannot transmit drinkable sweet water. So a person who is not at peace with themselves follows the temptations of the devil. They are not on God's path, they are on the devil's path. That person who already has an inner war, has inner hatred. So that hatred will come out in their words, in their actions, and that hatred will be directed towards others. That means that hatred towards others, the war, violence, the violence that is justified against children, against elderly women, how they justify wars in today's world. All of that comes from that hatred, from that inner fire. And all that fire comes from that contradiction. So the Holy Quran explains to us, it says, O believers, enter fully into peace. What does it mean to enter into peace? We have said there are 3 types of peace. And you cannot enter the path in reverse. The path of peace begins by entering into peace with God. Once you enter into peace with God, God is the merciful and loves you. He teaches you how to enter into peace with yourself. You do not have the knowledge, which is to know all of yourself. To what extent do you know yourself? We ignore who we are. Human beings do not have that deep self-knowledge. I do not even know my body and its details. I do not know the secrets of how my body functions. Nor do I know how my spiritual life works. How a sin affects me. I do not understand it. I do not know it. I only see the consequences, and some, not all. But God is the creator and knows everything. He is the merciful. Through Sharia, through the rules, it has taught you how to love yourself. It says, look, my beloved servant, do not do that. It is a sin. It harms you. It is a lie. Do not do it. It is wine. It is alcohol, fornication, betrayal. All of that will lead you to a state of disturbance, to a war, a fight within yourself. Because the intellect and the consciousness that we have are towards the light, they are towards God. When we align what we say, what we think, what we believe, with the intellect and the divine consciousness that we have, this God is pure light, the source of light, the source of the emotion of the light of God. So when what we do aligns with all of that, we are in peace within ourselves. But when we start to enter into what is lust, emotion, sin, and all that, we begin a war within ourselves. When we are at war within ourselves, we start the war with our family. A man who is unfaithful to his wife will mistreat his wife. You will never see a lying, treacherous, thieving man treat his family well. It means that when you commit the first sin will lead you to the second, to the third. This is the way of Satan. God says, do not follow the steps of the day. The first step, disobedience to God. The second third leads you towards sin, sin, sin. A state of war. Then you are at war with yourself. Then you will be at war with your neighbor. So everything that is said in the West, it just says, let's be at peace with our neighbor, without being at peace with yourself. Regarding you, it says, do whatever you want. Homosexuality, sin, fornication, lying, adultery, everything. It's fine. Do whatever you want. That person is at war. Like a person with a rifle aiming at themselves, they are in a state of war against themselves. How can they be at peace with others? It's impossible. A person who is selfish. The devil teaches you to be selfish, egocentric. A selfish person, how do they think of the good in others? How do they think of serving their neighbor? It's impossible. That's why everything that is said in the West claims you can be a selfish, lustful, corrupt, sinful, vicious, lost, decadent, degenerate person, and at the same time be at peace with others. It's pure lie. It's pure lie. Only a person who already... The path to peace begins with peace with God, peace with yourself, when that is in obedience to God. And then you will reach peace with your neighbors. You will have a broad chest to forgive others, to be generous with others, to be an honest, correct, pure, kind, generous person. This will only make sense when a person is a believer. When a person is corrupt, everything makes no sense. They only seek power. Why should I make sacrifices for others? Why? Why would I suffer serving others? It makes no sense. It's madness. So, in the materialistic world, materialism and disobedience to God means entering into war with yourself, against yourself. When you start in that war, you will begin the war against your neighbor. That's why those corrupt, vicious, degenerate presidents, those politicians of the world, they are practically dirty sinners because they have a state of war within them, a state of negative life, of suffering, of hell inside them. When they open their mouths, they speak of hell, inviting people to hell. What happens? Since they live in hell, they will transmit the outer hell to the outside world. That's why they love war. When they spill blood, they love it. They will establish today's economy, which is an economy based on war. Many times when there is a gap in the economies of countries, these potential countries of the world, they will fill their economic gaps with war, with the spilling of blood. That is the poisonous thinking. Always, if they talk about peace, it is pure lie. That is why we say, dear brothers, the only way to bring the world to peace is the way of God. God in the Sacred Heart says, enter into Islam, all the world. Islam means the search for truth and obeying the truth. To love God, to serve God, to love one's neighbor, and to serve one's neighbor. And all this will happen when a person stops being arrogant. They will be a Muslim submitted to the will of God. What does Muslim mean? What is the first step of Islam? I accept that I am not the arrogant one. I am not the Pharaoh. I will be an obedient servant of the Lord. That is called Islam. Is it clear? It is not strange. All the prophets were Muslims because all the prophets had abandoned their selfishness. They became noble, honest servants of God. When you say to God, I have decided to obey you and leave behind lust, ambition, and egocentrism, to leave. What leads me to be the bad one? To leave what makes me the wicked one. You will be in peace. You will be in Islam. You will be in blessing. Thus, a person of such spiritual joy can transmit that joy, that inner paradise of peace and love with God to the outside. That is the only way, dear brothers, for the believers to be in command. That is what we call the government of Wali al-Faqih, a pious person. Inside runs peace. Like Ayatollah al-Khamenei, like Zaid Hassan al-Nasrallah, men of God who have pure peace within. Pure peace. And at the same time, it is pure courage. Men of God to whom threats cannot affect. The only thing that matters to them is saving the oppressed, saving their neighbors. They are indeed firm before the arrogant because God has commanded them so. Before the arrogant authorities who want to lead the world to war, they are firm. They do not allow war. But protectors of neighbors, protectors of the elderly, of children, of all those who are people in need of protection. That is the way of God, and the world's problems will only be resolved when we address the problems of governments in the world. Think about it, dear brothers, and what the sacred Quran says. Let us enter the path of God's peace. Obey God, be at peace with ourselves, and be at peace with all neighbors. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. May the peace and blessing of God be with all of you.